This is our Bible study for December 9th for Fort Wayne Baptist Church. We are continuing our look at the church calendar, the liturgical year, and we're up to the season of Easter. Easter, of course, is one of the big holidays in the Christian year. It is also called Pascha or Resurrection Sunday. In Western Christianity, Easterntide, or the Easter season, begins on Easter Sunday and lasts 7 weeks. It ends on the 50th day, which is Pentecost. In Eastern Christianity, the season of Pascha begins on Pascha and ends with the 40th day, which is called the Feast of the Ascension. Easter's and the holidays related to it are movable feasts. That means they do not have fixed dates. They move around on the calendar. The reason for this is that Easter, from its very beginnings, was associated with the Passover. Both the Gregorian and Julian calendars are solar calendars, but the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. So the conflict between the two causes discrepancies. This is further exacerbated by the way it's calculated. The First Council of Nicaea in 325 established 2 rules. First, it should be independent of the Jewish calendar, and that it should be worldwidely uniform. Neither of which were, I think, ever entirely successful. In practice, what took a number of controversies over the centuries, eventually it became to be the first Sunday after the ecclesiastical, not necessarily literal, full moon that occurs on or soonest after the 21st of March. Even when we are calculating from the more accurate Gregorian calendar, the date of that full moon differs from the astronomical first full moon after the March equinox. I am glad that I do not have to figure it out. I only studied rocket science for 1 year, and beginning calculus was as far as I got. So I can't do this math. Eastern Christianity continues to use the Julian calendar, the one before the Reformed Gregorian calendar. There's a 13-day difference between the calendars between 1900 and 2099. The 21st of March corresponds during the 21st century to the 3rd of April in the Gregorian calendar. Easter can be anywhere between April 4th and May 8th, based on the Gregorian calendar. Also, because in the Julian full moon is always several days after the astronomical full moon, Easter is still later. Based on the visible moon's phases. So, yeah, like I said, I'm glad I don't have to calculate it. Now, in the 20th century, some efforts were made to fix Easter as the second. It's the Sunday that follows the second Saturday in April, which at the very least would have put it on a regular schedule. Nobody really bought into that. In the year 2021 in America, April 4th is Easter. Now, the first Christians were, of course, Jewish. And whether Jewish or Gentile, they associated the remembrance of Christ's resurrection with the Jewish Passover, and probably continued to observe the Passover in some form for quite some time. The earliest reference to Easter we have is in the middle of the 2nd century. So really not that long, only a century after the beginning of Christianity. And even at that point, evidence suggests that Easter was a fairly well-established holiday. From there, Easter, of course, has become one of the 2 dominant holidays of the Christian calendar, observed not just by Christians, but has made a significant impact on our culture in the Western world at the very least. And has numerous holidays associated with it. The name is associated with the Germanic Ostern, which really is kind of means spring, but possible linguistically it goes all the way back to the fertility goddesses of the ancient Near East, Ishtar, Astra, and Easter. We recognize that this coincidence is not really a coincidence, but it's something that even goes back all the way to the Jewish association of the Passover event with springtime. And therefore, this kind of seasonal holiday got tied to a religious holiday and has been that way for, if we include Passover, for several thousand years now. Now, we find that Easter is observed in different ways all over the world. One common practice in the Western world is the sunrise service, to get up to welcome the sun. Sometimes that is preceded by a service held at midnight, where the light of the Christ candle that has been removed from the sanctuary is brought back in. But certainly that's not as common in low church traditions as it is in high church traditions. The big ones associated with Easter are the Easter bunny and the Easter egg. Now, there has been a lot of effort made to associate the Easter egg with some kind of Christian symbolism. But originally, it was associated with pagan fertility cults. There's a story that long, long ago, the goddess, and sometimes it's Easter, Ishtar, we'll go with Easter. The goddess Easter woke up to begin spring. And as she walked, she came across a duck frozen in the water. It had rested. It had thought that things were thawing out, but overnight it had become trapped in the ice. Having compassion on the creature, Easter picked it up and transformed it into something more suitable for the early cold spring, a bunny rabbit. Now, because the bunny had originally been a duck, it continued to lay eggs. And thus the bunny and the egg are associated with Easter. Now, a more Christian story is that Mary Magdalene caught some of the drops of Jesus's blood in a basket she was carrying that had eggs in it. The eggs got dyed red, scarlet, purple, depending on the story, and thus Easter eggs. Honestly, it is so, Easter eggs are so far, and the Easter bunny are so far removed from pagan practices. They're just cultural now and kind of meaningless, other than in a fun for kids sort of way. Now, as we've been doing in these lessons, I want to read to you one of my favorite passages of Scripture associated with Easter. And I will tell you, I have been known to cry in the pulpit reading this one. This is John chapter 20. So if I get a little choked up, just forgive me. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. She came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb and don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separated from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who'd reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They did not understand the scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. The disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb, crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white, seated with Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away. I don't know where they put him." At this she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" Thinking it was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned to him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." She told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All four Gospels have the story of the women going early in the morning to the tomb. Mary Magdalene is included in all of them. Exactly who goes is, it varies a little bit from gospel to gospel. John tends to focus on his main characters, so he only talks about Mary Magdalene here. She tells Simon Peter and the other disciple, who in John's gospel is John, And by the way, the other disciple always comes out a little bit better than Peter does. Here, the other disciple was the first one to see and believe. What usually gets me is the story of Mary Magdalene left alone at the tomb. Little woman crying. She sees these angels. This is one of the few times in the Bibles that the first things out of an angel's mouth are not, "Do not be afraid." But then she sees somebody, and maybe it's the early morning light, maybe she's dazzled by the angels, maybe there is some divine reason she doesn't recognize him. But someone asks her, "Who are you looking for?" And she turns and says, "If you've moved him, tell me where he is, and I will go get him." And her saying that breaks my heart. She loved him so much, she's gonna go and pick up the body of a carpenter's son. I suspect Jesus was a rather robust and healthy fella. And just this image of her being willing to do that moves me. Jesus says, "Mary," so that she realizes who it is. She cries out, "Teacher." I suspect that she hugs him based on what Jesus says. Do not hold on to me. The word in Greek suggests clinging. I think Jesus is saying, "Yeah, I came back from the dead, but I'm not staying, so don't get too attached." He's not telling her, "Don't touch me." He is saying, "Don't hold on to me being here for long. I've got somewhere else to be." And she goes and she is the first witness of the resurrection. The resurrection story is powerful. Mark chooses not to include it in the original version of his gospel. It ends with the women running from an empty tomb where they have been told he is risen. We don't actually see Jesus. Probably because most of us who have heard the news of the resurrection never actually see Jesus. And I say most in the sense of 99.99% of us never see Jesus in the flesh. But nevertheless, this is the event. This is really the event. I mean, Christmas that we're about to celebrate is huge. The resurrection is the promise of Christmas fulfilled. Easter is what pays off Christmas. And without it, Christmas really doesn't mean a whole lot. And that's probably why both Mark and John don't really include any birth narratives. And even in Matthew, it's just, and Jesus was born. And then he skips ahead 2 years and talks about the wise men. you prepare for the coming of Christmas, keep a little bit of Easter in mind. For that's really when the gift that we receive at Christmas is open, like an empty tomb. Until next time, God bless you.